everyone. Welcome back to Underreported Stories, where I cover the news that CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News fail to report on or don't report on enough. The Supreme Court has made a final ruling on whether to allow the Trump administration to continue deporting illegal immigrants en masse under an 18th century wartime law. So the Trump administration has been using the Alien Enemies Act to deport illegal immigrants with ties to gangs under the belief or the supposition that illegal immigrants do constitute a foreign invasion from a foreign nation, even though the U.S. hasn't declared war on these illegal immigrants or on the countries of origin, such as Venezuela, for example. That has been the U.S.'s position, though, is that illegal immigrants are considered alien enemies. And a federal judge who's been very controversial, his name is James Boasberg, he ruled that these flights had to stop. And he claimed he was totally unclear on whether the Trump administration could use the Alien Enemies Act to deport illegals. But now the Supreme Court has ruled. And on Monday night, they ruled that the Trump administration can continue to use that act to deport illegal immigrants. I'm smiling. If you're watching, you can see I'm smiling. The key takeaway, though, from the Supreme Court ruling is that the Trump administration cannot just round up illegal immigrants and put them on planes and send them off. Now the administration must get a court hearing before, or give a court hearing to those illegal immigrants before those illegal immigrants are extradited from the U.S. Now, those court hearings no longer have to take place in Washington, D.C. They must take place in Texas, which is also a big win because I think you understand the demographics of each of those areas, Washington, D.C. being very liberal, Texas being, generally speaking, quite conservative. And this is just a huge win for the Trump administration. This allows the Trump administration to enact their preferred policies, no longer having to fight this whack job left-wing judge, which the Trump administration has actually called for the removal of this judge, Judge James Boasberg. They're calling for his impeachment. But they've really circumvented that by the Supreme Court weighing in and saying this is allowed to go on. Donald Trump was celebrating on Truth Social last night. And hypothetically, I mean, the left should be celebrating as well. Because the ACLU, the groups that were suing on behalf of these illegal immigrants, they were out there saying something along the lines of, we are suing to uphold the standard of due process for illegal immigrants. Great. Well, the due process of illegal immigrants has been upheld because of the Supreme Court ruling stating that the Trump administration can use the Alien Enemies Act, and then the people that they deem of gangs, that they deem illegal immigrants that must be deported, they then get a trial, a clear, concise, expedited trial where they can argue for why they shouldn't be sent back to their home country, back to an El Salvadorian prison, extreme prison for terrorists, etc. But that's not what the left is happy about. They're not happy at all. They're not. This is a win-win situation for conservatives, in my opinion. I had always been a little trepidatious about the lack of due process that was coming from the Trump administration under this. But to me, this is the best of both worlds, right? You get the illegal immigrants out of this country. You can do it in an expedited fashion, and they still have the ability to have due process, and we're not just over steamrolling on people's rights. But this is not going to appease the liberals, even though it should. And I'm smiling. I'm still smiling because this makes it look so much worse politically for the left than it did before. I always said that due process was a noble fight, but it was still politically dicey for them because, to be honest, people don't understand, the general population doesn't understand the intricacies of politics and the intricacies of due process rights and all those things, like the litigious aspect of all of this. And so being on the side of let's spend more taxpayer money to bring illegal immigrants home, that was just like never going to be a super popular idea. But now, these illegal immigrants have due process. So for the left, they said they were suing because they wanted the due process for the illegal immigrants. Well, they got that. But they're going to continue to protest because it was never about the due process. They want the illegal immigrants here. And that continues to make us go, why? And we opine on this on TV all the time. Every time I'm on Newsmax, I mean, you hear somebody opining in a different way or saying this in a different way. If you just want illegal immigrants here, you're doing it for the voter base, or what you perceive to be the voter base. And it's odd, and it's wrong. And I think the left had this shield with the due process thing, and now that the Supreme Court has this tumbling down, it's not looking so good for them. And I've also been hearing from you guys that there have been a lot of confusion about the wrongful deportations that allegedly took place, especially regarding a man whose name has been popping up more and more in conversation, the name Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And the left claims that Trump wrongfully deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia. So I went and did all the research so that you could have just the facts. Here is everything we know about this man thus far. You come to your own conclusion. I am not here to do that for you. You do that for you. It's no shock that the Trump administration is deporting people en masse, specifically illegal immigrants that they believe have ties to gangs. And then they are sending those gang members, perceived or real, to a maximum security prison in El Salvador. Among those deported on that flight, that very contentious flight that started the war between James Boasberg, the judge, and the Trump administration. Among those deported was a man named Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And he was an illegal immigrant. He came to the United States illegally, and he has been here since 2012, so if my math stands correct, about 13 years. He got married to an American, and him and this American woman had a baby. Now, the Trump administration has admitted it made an error in sending Abrego Garcia to the El Salvadorian prison. A clerical error is what they said. And so a judge has since ordered that Abrego Garcia be brought back to the U.S. Now, the Trump administration isn't disputing that Abrego Garcia shouldn't have been sent to El Salvador. They say, oops, our bad, shouldn't have done that. And you can lambast the Trump administration all you want for that. I'm not going to stop you. However, the Trump administration is also saying, okay, well, we should have sent him to a maximum security prison. However, he's still an illegal immigrant. He can't come back to the U.S. So what the media is trying to do, because Trump isn't taking this rolling over as they anticipated he would with a leftist judge ordering this, so the media is attempting to paint Abrego Garcia as this innocent asylum seeker. He's just so innocent. But that is yet to be proven as fact. These are the facts, okay? Abrego Garcia entered the U.S. illegally in 2012. He'd been in the country until 2019, when he was arrested outside of a Home Depot with 3 other men seeking work as day laborers. And an informant, I believe it was one of the 3 men who was also arrested alongside Abrego Garcia, claimed he had ties to the notorious MS-13 gang. Now, Abrego Garcia has denied these ties. So we have an informant saying this guy has ties to a gang, and we have the guy with alleged ties to the gang saying, I don't have any ties to the gang. And I heard a lot of you in the comments when I made a short form video on this say, well, if the gang member denies it, he must not be a gang member. Exactly. But that's all we have right now, is one witness testimony versus the claims of it's a he said, she said. Ultimately, this went to court because these men were arrested, and Abrego Garcia claimed that a gang called Barrio 18 was terrorizing himself and his family and extorting him and his mother over the mother's successful business. And that's why he ultimately fled to the U.S. So the judge looked at that in 2019 and said, okay, well, you're supposed to make an asylum claim when you come into the U.S., so you should have made an asylum claim between 2012 and 2013. And since you didn't, asylum claim denied. Then that same judge said, however, you are at risk of persecution in your home country. We see that. And it's very unclear where it went from there, other than you can't claim asylum. Also, we understand that you might have the qualifications of an asylum seeker. And all we have kind of in the middle of that is Abrego Garcia doing regular check-ins with ICE. I don't really get that. Personally, I'm like, you're doing check-ins with ICE. Doesn't that mean like ICE would detain you and send you back to your home country unless you had correct asylum status? Anyway, now the press secretary, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, claims that the Department of Homeland Security has proof tying Abrego Garcia to MS-13. However, the administration is yet to show that proof. And what's really frustrating for me is when the administration, any administration, says, well, we have proof. Okay, then freaking show us the proof. You know, this all goes away the second you show the proof. And I understand that the administration is like, listen, trust us, we've got like a bajillion things going on. I get it. I'm inclined to trust them. But that's not journalistic standards. Journalistic standards are show me the proof, and then I will report it that way. So that's what's a little frustrating about it. Same with Tom Homan. Awesome guy. Tom Homan, he's the director of ICE. He claims there are multiple factors that go into defining someone as part of a gang. And listen, I'm inclined to believe him. I've met the man, okay? We still need proof. When these asylum claims, or when these claims in general of alleged gang members go to these courts in Texas, the government will still need proof, right? So they're not doing themselves any favor by saying, just trust us. That's not how it works. And we've already seen that kind of being a losing strategy. The Department of Justice actually had to sideline one of their own lawyers because the lawyer wasn't given enough proof to defend the government's actions in deporting Abrego Garcia. And now he's been taken off it, potentially fired from the Department of Justice because he didn't know how to defend the government's action because the government doesn't have any proof. And so that's what I think is going to be very difficult. They may very well have the proof, but they need to show it. I don't think that's a super hard or controversial thing to do or ask for as American citizens. We trust, but we verify. I'm sure that's coined from something very popular, I'm sure. Anyway, we have lots of stories to get into. I just felt it very important to get you guys all caught up on the details, the facts, all the things of this Supreme Court ruling, so you know what to look for moving forward. But anyway, here's what we've got on our docket for today. We have Mahmoud Khalil, that Columbia student who is detained for partaking in pro-Palestinian protests. He actually wrote a letter to Columbia University. I'm going to pull the letter up. We're going to go through the whole thing so you don't have to go to any other source to understand what is in the letter. We're going to read it together. Plus, there is outrage over two transgender players being the final players to compete in a women's sports championship, basically making women superfluous in the women's category. And we have AOC getting heat for flying first class. Those stories and many, many more, including talking about the controversy over the death of a high school athlete. We're going to get into that at the end of today's show. So without further ado, let's get into the 5 underreported stories that you need to know. I love uncovering the truth in politics, in media, and even the truth about what's in our so-called cleaning products. Most of those store-bought cleaning products are loaded with toxic chemicals, hormone disruptors, and allergens. During allergy season, seriously, we don't need that. This is stuff that can impact your health, your kids' health, and even your pets. That's why I made the switch to Branch Basics. Their products are completely non-toxic and human safe. No synthetic fragrances, no weird chemicals. They use plant and mineral-based formulas that leave your home truly clean without compromising your health. If you are ready to toss the toxins, head over to branchbasics.com/Chrissy, or you can use the link in the description. And when you use code Chrissy, that is CHRISSY, you will get 15% off your first order. Again, use code Chrissy at checkout. Mahmoud Khalil was a graduate student at Columbia University who graduated back in 2024 and was a key planner in the pro-Palestine encampments that overtook the university last spring. The Trump administration, namely Secretary of State Marco Rubio, have revoked Khalil's student visa, and he has been detained in ICE in Louisiana. Now, while in detention, he has decided to publish an op-ed with the Columbia Spectator, and we're going to parse through that together. Well, it starts off hot. He says, "To Columbia, an institution that laid the groundwork for my abduction, and to its student body, who must not abdicate their responsibility to resist repression. Since my abduction on March 8th, the intimidation and kidnapping of international students who stand for Palestine has only accelerated." He goes on to list a handful of individuals who have either had their student visas revoked or who have chosen to self-deport or flee the country, which sounds really dramatic. One of them went to Canada. Ooh, scary. And others who have gone back to their home country or had their, like I said, student visas revoked. Mahmoud Khalil says that the situation of going from the free country of America into the free country of Canada is oddly reminiscent of when I fled the brutality of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria and sought refuge in Lebanon. Right, the same thing. The logic used by the federal government to target myself and my peers is a direct extension of Colombia's repression playbook concerning Palestine. In the 18 months since the genocidal campaign in Gaza began, Colombia has not only refused to acknowledge the lives of Palestinians sacrificed for Zionist settler colonialism, but it has actively reproduced the language used to justify this killing. Now, in order for this to make sense, you have to understand that for many of these students, everything is seen through the eyes of this war. Everything is seen through the eyes of oppression. It's a semi-oppression Olympics, right? If you see the world in terms of oppression Olympics, you see the world through, every decision that Colombia makes comes down to whether it is good or bad for Palestinians. And I'm sorry, that is not reality. It's not. This goes on to say, you received countless emails from former President Manouche Shafik, former interim President Katrina Armstrong, and the deans of your schools that manufactured public hysteria about anti-Semitism without once mentioning the tens of thousands of Palestinians murdered under bombs made of your dollars. He's trying to say Colombia did so much to protect Jewish students from anti-Semitism by allowing an entire encampment to ensue, by allowing professors and students alike to essentially bar Jewish students from getting to their classroom. That was the university being complicit in combating anti-Semitism. So now that we have established that much in this article, I think we understand that we're reading somewhat of a delusional perspective. And that's not to say he doesn't make any fair points. But this is delusional to think that Colombia was complicit in combating anti-Semitism. It was not. It was not. It says, your letter, Colombia suppressed student dissent under the auspices of combating anti-Semitism. Last year, Colombia turned over student disciplinary records to Congress and created the Task Force on Anti-Semitism that broadly categorized anti-Israel sentiment as hate speech to condemn protest. I'm sure this kid, Mahmoud Khalil, who's an adult now, I'm sure he has no problem with hate speech coming from Israel, but he has a problem when he can't lock alleged hate speech against Israel. Now, I think all of this is nonsense. Hate speech is a stupid thing. You should be able to say whatever the hell you want to say, even if it's insulting and awful. But it's the physical blocking of Jewish students and threatening their safety. There's a line. There's a line there. But you can spew that anti-Israel nonsense all you want. It might get you deported. But I don't believe hate speech should exist. So I understand his problem. Though, I am racist all this time.
Back you push it, fella. But
Saying that it's actually the Jews. The Jews go on campus and they provoke by existing. Some of your classmates work with faculty to run doxing platforms, submit our names to websites and groups like Canary Mission and Bedar, and turn our lives into targets. Now, I think you can view that two ways. There are consequences for your actions. You want to go and call for the extermination of the Jewish state? I don't think Jews are going to be happy about that. Same thing around. You think that you go out there and you protest for the extermination of a Palestinian state, which is really, I don't really know many Israelis advocating for that. But anyway, there would be consequences. There would be pro-Palestinian groups that have your picture out there. There are consequences to actions. I don't really find that to be the most appalling or crazy sentiment. The letter goes on to say, they do this work while they sit comfortably behind their screens. Their actions have real life, very real consequences for the rest of us. I'm getting a little angry. If I'm deprived of my child in the first moments of his life, the people responsible will have been, among others, these students. Goes on to say, these students, again, this is just referencing Jewish people, who have smeared and attacked us, have also benefited from the mutual backing of this institution and the federal government. Unable to build a movement supported by their peers, these students met instead with right-wing members of Congress to pressure a university crackdown. Abandoning all pretenses of neutrality, the provost and the former president also convened with the Israeli Minister of Education. Together, both coalitions put the weight of the federal government down on students. So I ask you, who is truly at risk here? Now, he goes on to say that this is a modern-day McCarthyism, that this is modern-day racism, and that the university has abandoned all principles of free speech and academic rigor. You can read the rest of it. It is linked below if you're interested in reading the entire rantings. But those are the most entire, or that of the entirety, are the most important parts. The other thing I want to end on is that he continues to call for the liberation of Palestine. So that's what Mahmoud Khalil is doing while being detained by ICE. Where I think we need to have an open and honest conversation about this. And this is somebody, like, I'm pretty pro-Israel in terms of, like, I'm not advocating for any war. I don't think we should be giving money to war. But I've been to Israel. I've been into the West Bank. I've been as close to Gaza as you could possibly get. You know, what's going on there, like, they're clearly being provoked by a bunch of radicals. So I say all of that to say I have bias in here, yet at the same time, I understand that a push to exclusively keep Jewish students safe results in pro-Palestinian students feeling attacked by the measures that are taken to protect Jewish students and vice versa, right? Colombia at first was trying to protect the rights of the pro-Palestinians to have their free speech, and that left the Jewish students feeling unprotected. And then they went in and tried to combat anti-Semitism, and that made the pro-Palestinian students feel provoked and attacked. And what it does is it just entrenches people into their viewpoints, right? Oh, well, the university is against me because they're for combating anti-Semitism, which is crazy to say. Oh, the university is against me because they're for a group, or they allow a group to speak that calls for the extermination of my ethnicity. And it entrenches people into their own views. And I think that's very similar, kind of similar to what's happening with Candace Owens, where, like, she's saying things that some things are truthful, some things are dramatized. Either way, Jewish organizations are going after her and going after her hard. And that only entrenches her because she then perceives the groups that are going after her as evil for going after her. It just only entrenches her in her anti-Israel views instead of trying to, open the door and be like, oh, we don't care what you say. Come see for yourself, and experience it yourself. Because I think that's kind of the best thing that Israel has to offer is you can go there, look around, and you're just like, okay, the lies are very prominent in Western media and Western understanding of this. But this is the hard truth that I think we will inevitably have to have a reckoning in this country. And the truth is that Westerners are going to stick together. We are humans. We are tribal. The U.S. is a Western country. And the U.S. is going to uphold and safeguard the values, and therefore the people, that closest align with their interest. That's just how countries work. That's how the world works. That's how humanity works. Hence, the U.S. has a vested interest in working with, whether it be Israel, a Western country in the Middle East, the Jews, sounds so funny. It sounds like conspiratorial to say it that way. Jewish people or religious groups of people that have a similar worldview to Western values. There is a necessity for exclusivity of values in order for a country to function properly. That is apparently a controversial thing to say. People that come to this country, including students on visas, must assimilate, or I'm so sorry, get lost. Values that call for the destruction of Western allies, Western religions, Western customs, those values are not welcome here. The world is big. Go find another home. And this kumbaya melting pot idea of what America is has been taken too far. What it was supposed to mean was people from all over the world could come to America. They would have their cultures and their customs, but we would assimilate the American way of life and be together and get to enjoy the fact that maybe your neighbor celebrates Kwanzaa instead of Christmas, and you would get to learn the values of Kwanzaa. Not that we would be upholding the values of people to be able to think that America has no right to exist. Advocating for values that are antithetical to the West will result in you feeling ostracized if that's your worldview, and likely you getting booted from here. I don't think that's that much of a dramatic thing to say, but it's a reckoning that America needs to have. It's not just America, it's a lot of Western countries. In France, I recently saw a poll that said a lot of Frenchmen, it was like 50+%, think they're on the brink of needing some sort of civil war or civil realignment because there's too much going on in not enough assimilation. And yes, we need to be able to assimilate and have a similar culture and a similar understanding. It's a necessary thing in countries. That's why there's lots of countries and lots of places to go. I digress. Similarly to being ostracized in your views about perhaps Palestine or anti-Western values, if you nowadays advocate for men being in women's sports, you will also feel ostracized in America because those views are not popular. And that's going to bring us to our next story, which is that two individuals who competed at the finals of the women's pool tournament. Their names are Harriet Haynes and Lucy Smith. These two, Harriet and Lucy, were born biological males. And in the lead up to this national championship, they beat 4 female-born opponents to get to the championship. So then the finals rolls around, right? And you have 2 biological males playing in what's supposed to be the women's category. And protesters show up to the event and held signs that said things along the lines of, "He's a man." And there were also protesters there with a lot of signs. You'll see them in the media being reported saying, "We stand with Lynn Pinches." Now, Lynn is a biological woman who, say her name, as people would say, who is truly a martyr for women. She's a biological woman who in 2023 made it to the finals and was forced to play against Harriet, the same person who is playing in this year's finals as well. And again, Harriet is a biological male. And instead of playing Harriet, Lynn decided to forfeit the match. Let Harriet win. in protest of playing men. Now, one thing I will grant in this conversation is that these individuals are not being physically harmed by having biological men play in this sport, unlike other sports where, biological man chucks a volleyball at your head. That's going to hurt. So I get that. I'm happy to make that concession. But the big question is, what's the point of having a women's league if the women are just going to lose to neutered men, whichever one you want to say? Can't we create some sort of open category or something? Like, can't there be a way in which the women's category is just for women? Do we need to start calling these not the men's and the women's categories, but the female and the male category? I feel like that might just help a little bit. No. Males cannot come into the female sports arena, compete, and then win everything without getting backlash. That's not a hot take. I feel like people are waiting for Riley Gaines to come in and make a hot take. The problem isn't, no bashing on Riley Gaines. Quite literally an amazing human. I am could never be her. She's the happiest, nicest, sweetest human being I've ever met in my life. But her takes nowadays, they are completely in line with where Americans are, right? A New York Times Ipsos poll found that 80% of Americans disagree with biological men being in women's sports. So I'm not saying this to say anything bad of the women who are speaking out right now. Every single one of their voices is necessary. They're amazing. I am not criticizing them in any way, shape, or form. However, I very much subscribe to the belief that if we want to see change on this issue, we don't just need the Riley Gaines, the people who are happy to embrace the right and who are going from a Republican conservative point of view. We need liberal voters to get more vocal about their very obviously held beliefs that men shouldn't be in women's sports. And they can't just say it behind closed doors. They need to say it out loud, and then they need to go into Congress, go to congressional Democrats, and get them to take a stance against this. And this is happening, by the way. This isn't the Chrissy delusion of what I want a perfect world to look like. No. There are great examples of women doing this. Notably, a woman named Erin Friday. Love this woman. She had a daughter who then identified as her son, who then realized that that was not right. And I did a whole documentary with her when I was at the Daily Caller. It was a really great documentary exposing what goes on in these circles. And Erin is a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat. I don't even think she's conservative now, not even a little. But she's a Democrat using her voice to move the needle on men being in women's sports. That takes guts, and we need more of that. We need more guts. It also takes guts to be a blatant hypocrite. And that's exactly what's happening in our third story, which is AOC's blatant hypocrisy. AOC was photographed flying first class to a Bernie Sanders event titled Fighting Oligarchy. It's been reported that a first class JetBlue seat on that route cost $1,100. So there's an abundance of hypocrisy sitting right in front of us. Let's start out with the fact that she's going to a Fighting Oligarchy rally, which means she's fighting against a handful of wealthy people, or perceived handful of wealthy people, while she sits first class to stand next to other wealthy people on a stage and tell less wealthy people why they should hate the other wealthy people. But not her and Bernie Sanders. Hate all the other wealthy people. Okay. Hypocrite. Then we got the climate hypocrisy. So in case you didn't know this, climate activists hate loads of first class because they believe that first class seats produce more carbon emissions than if the whole plane was just economy seating, like a Southwest Airlines or something. And that's because more people would fit on a plane than if there were those big, luxurious, cushy first class seats. And since AOC is the mom of the Green New Deal, boom, hypocrisy. Sorry. I mean, it's funny. Like, it's seriously rich that she wants to eat the rich while enjoying every second of becoming rich off the American taxpayer. Like, just admit it, girl. Just admit it. It's nice to have a little wealth. It's nice to sit first class, because I don't know if you ever sat first class. One time, my dad used to travel all the time for work, so he would, anytime like him and I would travel together, he just had points, and so I'd get to upgrade and sit with him. It was the best. I sat in one of those little lay flat seats. Bougie, okay? Not afraid to admit it. Because if you work hard, you get paid for working hard. Maybe not always in this economy for young people, but most of the time, that is the standard. Work hard, get paid for working hard. You can sit first class, okay? The difference is AOC is adamantly against this and uses every bit of her time to advocate against stuff like this, and then goes and does it. And simultaneously, if you get rich on your own, you know, you're a business owner, you're an employee, middle manager, whatever, wherever it is, that's great. But you shouldn't be getting rich off of lying to taxpayers. It's hard to know what information to trust, especially when information is released faster than it can be verified. And let's be honest, reporting nowadays really favors clickbait journalism over high-quality journalism. And that's why when I prep this show and when I'm reading my news day to day, I trust and use Ground News. It's an app and website that combines news from all different sides of the political spectrum to give you the facts and see where the media is exaggerating, sensationalizing, or underreporting news. I mean, come on, guys. It's like they made an app for you and I. When you use my link in the description, you will get 40% off of the Vantage subscription, which, by the way, I pay for out of my own pocket, and it's totally worth it. Head over to check.ground.news/Chrissy, CHRISSY, to get informed on the go. Speaking about clickbait journalism, is Massachusetts passing a bill that allows secret abortions for minors. So in an online post from Libs of TikTok, very popular X account, she alleged that Massachusetts Democrats are pushing bills that allow minors to consent to abortions. So here's what it says. Libs of TikTok reads, Massachusetts can pass a bill allowing secret abortions for minors. Massachusetts Democrats are pushing 2 bills that would allow people to consent to abortions regardless of age. It also requires any medical procedures to be kept strictly confidential to the patient. This effectively destroys a parent's right to consent to their child's medical decisions and hides medical information from the parent. Traditionally, when I see things like this, I, again, trust but verify. I go and I find the bill and I read it. And what I loathe about social media and X, again, why I use Ground News, is that people have a tendency to skew what something actually says to make it sound more sinister than it actually is, and people are then rewarded for that and given notoriety. So to be clear, let me set my biases here. I am very pro-life on a personal level. I think that abortion is one of the worst things that you could possibly do for yourself, you know, health from a health standpoint, but also a mental standpoint. I think it's unbiblical. I don't think it's a good idea. However, I am pro-choice by the binary definition on a national level. I'm a huge advocate for heartbeat bills, but in general, I am in favor of very limited government interaction, and that's why I think that states' rights is great. That's where I stand. So I am not a fan of any far-left bill that enshrines abortion up until birth into law, like Minnesota tries to do. So there's my bias. However, what Libs of TikTok is selling is not what this potential bill actually says. I pulled it up, I read it. The potential bill states that any hospital with an emergency care department must provide an abortion if the woman in question is facing death or severe harm from her pregnancy or active labor. So, if a young woman is at risk of dying and she consents to an abortion to save her life, this is permissible in Massachusetts, as is a common medical practice. Like, if you are dying and the baby, like an ectopic pregnancy is probably the best example, yes, like this is common medical practice. Nothing crazy. So that same bill then says It says pregnant persons the entire time, which, like, I'm not going to say that crap. Come on, guys. It's women. Women. The bill says that a woman's signature on the consent form to have an abortion, if she is dying, shall not be deemed invalid if that woman is underage. So if a pregnant 17-year-old is facing life or death in the hospital, mom and dad are not there, she opts for an abortion because that is what the doctors are telling her is the only way to save her life, then yes, she can do that and the doctors can do that. The bill goes on to say the consent forms or related documents about the abortion remain confidential, aka mom and dad cannot see the consent forms, but it does not say that mom and dad cannot know about what took place. They simply cannot see the consent forms. Problematic? Sure. This whole bill that the Democrats in Massachusetts have put together, it is very much crafted from this absolute delusion that Republicans want to force women to die out on emergency room tables or some crazy shit like that. And they're trying to pass this law in Massachusetts when, like I said, abortion rights are a state right. And far-left blue states like Massachusetts can set their own abortion laws. So if they want to do what Minnesota did and have abortion up until the moment of birth, there's nothing stopping them. What they're doing in this moment is they're fear-mongering to susceptible young women, not actually keeping people safe or healthy, because that is already standard practice in medicine right now. No abortion law in America is ever going to stop saving someone's life, ever. To misrepresent the bill, though, and say that the point of the bill is to allow secret abortions for minors is also completely misrepresenting what is being said here. This is a bill that you could absolutely, without a doubt, be critical of, okay? It's not a real bill. It's meant to fearmonger young women. It's evil. But saying that the entire bill was created to allow secret abortions for minors makes it come across like Massachusetts is trying to create this bill where any minor can get a secret abortion at any point in the that's not what it says. It's not. It's attempting to enshrine a misinterpretation of Republican policy into law in an effort to play politics and basically allow Democrats to say, look what we had to enshrine into law in Massachusetts for you to feel safe. And so I hate to be the unpopular person to do this, but both parties in this can be wrong. They both are wrong. Libs of TikTok completely misconstrued what this bill is, and this bill is also crap. Two things can be true at once. Usually the truth lies in the middle, and that's what I'm here to do. Anyway, let's get to our fifth and final story, which is that the Middle Eastern Child's Alliance, which I had not heard of, but it is referred to as MECA. It's a California nonprofit that designs K-12 curriculum materials, which, yikes, you never want a children's curriculum material organization to be in the news. Well, it turns out MECA reportedly has financial ties to a U.S.-designated foreign terrorist organization. Look at that. All of our stories coming full circle today. We started out with a little terrorist sympathizer, Mahmoud Khalil, and now we are here reporting on MECA, more terrorist sympathizers. So MECA reportedly has ties to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which has sent more than $31 million in aid to Palestinian territory, Iraq, and Lebanon since 1988. The nonprofit expressed its support for the events that transpired on October 7th, 2023. So this was not found in a report from National Review, although it is linked below. National Review did a write-up on this. So it's very common practice in journalism for a research group to uncover something, and that research group will take it to a news outlet that aligns with them. So the research group, I believe is the Capital Research Center or something along those lines, they uncovered these ties between MECA, the nonprofit, and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. So that researcher now is advocating that the IRS go in and investigate and revoke MECA's status as a nonprofit because it 100% is against IRS code for a nonprofit to engage in criminal or terroristic acts. So if you are aiding and abetting a foreign terrorist group, that's a big yikes. Probably can't do that. The IRS should very likely stop that. This again goes back to my point, though. If these groups, including a nonprofit, cannot align with American values, I simply ask the question, why be or operate in America? What is going? It's so counterintuitive. Unless the stated goal is to be in America and, create the downfall and demise of American culture and democracy, in which case we should get rid of you. I just don't understand. These organizations, these far leftists, they love the freedoms afforded to them in America. And then they use those freedoms to advocate for really regressive societies and values. It's one of my favorite slang words to say, but it's back-ass word, okay? I just don't get it. It will never make sense to me. I don't know. Anyway, before we wrap up today's show, I want to talk about the absolute tragedy that took place in Texas that resulted in the death of Austin Metcalf. 17-year-old Austin Metcalf was at a track meet in Frisco, Texas, when he was stabbed following an altercation with another student during a high school track meet. Austin was stabbed in the heart by 17-year-old Karmelo Anthony, who has been arrested and charged with first-degree murder. What allegedly transpired, according to a police report, was that Karmelo was in a tent designated for Austin's high school team. Karmelo was in the wrong tent. They are not on the same team. And Austin then got, allegedly, aggressive with Karmelo, telling him to leave the private tent. And that's when Karmelo pulled out a knife and stabbed Austin. Austin died in the arms of his twin brother, Hunter Metcalf, who appears to be the only witness to what happened. What seems to be a very cut and dry story, though, has quickly evolved into a racial conversation. Now, for the listening audience, you must know, Austin Metcalf was white and Karmelo Anthony was black. I do have to be very careful in my statements because Karmelo Anthony's legal team is doling out demands for retractions if journalists or commentators, such as myself, claim that he stabbed Austin Metcalf. To my understanding, it is not up for debate whether Karmelo stabbed Austin. It's not up for debate whether Austin died as a result of being anything other than stabbed. What's up for debate right now is whether Karmelo killed Austin in the pursuit of self-defense, whether it was premeditated or not, whether Karmelo brought a knife with him to a school-sanctioned track event. All of this is to be uncovered as we get more details. But again, to my knowledge, whether Karmelo killed Austin is not up for debate. My friend Xavier Girusso, who hosts a popular show for PragerU, received a demand for retraction for defamatory comments from the American Freedmen Legal Fund, demanding that his tweets about Karmelo's alleged actions be taken off of social media. Here's what the statement reads. The American Freedmen Legal Fund issued this formal statement in a response to a post by Xavier, which publicly labels Karmelo Anthony, an unverified youth, as someone who belongs in prison and called him evil. These remarks are not only cruel and inflammatory, but legally defamatory, especially given the absence of a conviction and the fact that this case is still pending. This type of speech is irresponsible and inflicts further harm on a youth, unverified, who is still presumed innocent under the law. No person, especially a minor, should be subject to open calls for incarceration or character assassination without due process. It is not defamatory to think a student who stabs another student, in self-defense or not, belongs in jail. That's a quite reasonable opinion. Unless all of a sudden this legal defense team is now claiming that a magical knife came out of nowhere and stabbed Austin by itself and Karmelo just happened to be there. Their argument is illogical. But this story somehow has garnered quite the opposition, mostly from Black people online, who claim that Austin Metcalf, the student who was stabbed, got, quote, exactly what he deserved. There have been GoFundMes started in Karmelo's name. Here's a quick peek at a Karmelo supporter.
Y'all not gonna make me believe or feel any kind of sympathy for Austin Metcalf at all. He put his hands on that young man when he should have kept them hands to himself. When the young man told him, touch me and see, you bet not touch me, that meant that I don't want you in my space. I don't want you touching me. Rosa Parks days is over. You cannot think that you can move somebody out of a seat that you don't own and think that it's going to be okay. And you can't determine how I'm going to retaliate on you when you put your hands on me in an aggressive manner. Austin Metcalf got exactly what he deserved. Point blank, period. It's time out for feeling sorry for somebody's feelings or feeling emotional about somebody's feelings. Austin Metcalf should have kept his damn hands to himself. Point blank, period.
If you're wondering how this narrative spun completely out of control, again, my friend Xavier did a great job at providing context as to why people are donating to Karmelo. His statement reads, I am not defending Karmelo. I am providing context for those genuinely wondering why people would be donating to a murderer. It's not just because he's Black. The growing narrative is that Karmelo stabbed in, quote, self-defense. This is because, allegedly, Austin broke Karmelo's phone, grabbed his backpack, and threatened Karmelo after he refused to leave the tent, leading to Karmelo's horrific escalation. People are comparing the circumstances to Kyle Rittenhouse. Now, that is not my stance, Xavier says. That is what I am reading as the growing narrative. Xavier said Karmelo belongs in prison. What he did was evil. As this case creates more division, I hope we start to focus on the facts rather than just demonizing all Black youth. But I'm sure I'm being too optimistic. We have to await trial in order to get the full context of the story. But sadly, one party won't be there to give his side of the story because he's no longer with us. Now, if the alleged narrative is true, that Karmelo was in the wrong tent and Austin was this awful bully who was being mean to Karmelo, that just doesn't warrant murder. Unless there was an actual threat to Karmelo's life, that is not self-defense. And already the details aren't adding up, right? Austin stole Karmelo's backpack. Then how was he able to pull out a knife from his backpack? The details are not adding up. So I am skeptical, but of course here to bring you the full story and all the context so that you can make informed decisions. I will do my absolute best to keep you up to date on the story moving forward as it heads to trial. If you are a real one and you made it to the end of today's show, will you drop the medal, like the gold medal emoji, in the comments so I know that you made it to the end of today's show? Thank you so much, and I'll see you back here on Thursday. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to subscribe and leave a comment about how beautiful, intelligent, and funny I am. And if you want more content, click right over here for more videos and clips of my show. I'll see you back here next time. Bye!